Hello and welcome to the Mission Driven podcast, where we have insightful, notable conversations with industry leaders around the world. Today I have Michelle Matthews, Dr. David Cunic, and Dr. Craig Leivent. All are passionate about CBD industry in different ways. Michelle Matthews is a trained chef and had been in the industry for over 30 years. She specializes in CBD and hemp-infused meals. She produced the first ever infused course in the history of the James Beard House in New York City for Chef Adrian Cruz's dinner. She's currently at the beginning stages of offering infused private chef and meal prep services in Ohio, as well as consulting services for edible and infused menus nationwide. Dr. Craig has a doctorate in pharmacology and botany, which brings the ideal combination of modern medicine and plant chemistry together. For over 20 years, he's been studying the benefits of cannabis on the human body, from anecdotal evidence to clinical research. He's also the owner of Lincoln City Collective, a cannabis dispensary in Oregon, and is the owner of Flowerpower.coffee company based in New York. Dr. David, a man that needs no introduction, is the CEO and co-founder of UCS Advisors and Investor Relations. Dr. David, as most people know him, has raised capital, expanded several companies, and has employed over 300 people. He's in the medical field for over 18 years and has been in the cannabis industry for over 10 years. Some people call him the triple-headed dragon due to his diversity and experience. So I'll just jump right in. Thank you all for being on this podcast. I know you all come from around the country and your expertise is wide and varied. So how has the pandemic affected the industry, and is it an essential business? Was it before the pandemic and the lockdowns, during, and especially now kind of that it's after the pandemic?
I think in terms of investor relations and looking at people looking to invest in the cannabis, hemp, and CBD sector, it's been huge in a positive effect, because for the first time in over 80 years, over 30 states have deemed cannabis and CBD an essential business. And to see cannabis and hemp and CBD deemed essential, like the 7-Elevens, like big tobacco, like alcohol, it's really kind of shown the way to a lot of people saying, okay, business is going up, it's not going away anywhere. And it's really showing people who were kind of on the fence about it, showing the benefits of having that type of industry and sector producing tax revenue for the states.
That's great.
Nice. I know from my personal experience, everybody's at home and they're experimenting. So we're seeing a lot of different experimentation and a lot of different ideas coming out of all these, these chefs were all laid off while the restaurant industry has been decimated. So we're seeing people starting their own businesses and really getting into infusing and looking at, their quote unquote side hustle becoming their main now. So I think you're going to see a lot more innovation going forward. And I think that's going to help the push for legalization. Right. You're going to have more people involved.
Absolutely. And so, Dr. Craig, being that you have a botany background, what is your take on CBD for either PTSD, which I feel like a lot of people are going to deal with, if not already dealing with, as well as the other health benefits of it?
I've noticed that people that were taking antidepressants and some other medicine for moods or even pain, anti-inflammatories, with the pandemic and them having more time to themselves and to look inside, they've went and experimented with CBD options and to utilize natural medicines while they can, and they were at a safe home place or not traveling as much in case they did have any side effects, which are usually very minimal with CBD in general. So I've seen a lot more people experiment and utilize CBD and actually start to decrease the amount of other medications they were on for the anxiety and the inflammation they were experiencing. And the retail sector, I've noticed that with my dispensary, the state level has opened up avenues to make it easier for the patient or client or to get their cannabis. They opened up a curbside delivery 150 feet of our establishment, which used to be illegal. It had to be put through the metric system, which is a seed to sale tracking system. And it was pretty tedious to just, you had to use a Google map, you had to input the map, and you had to do the route, what the driver was carrying, who the driver was. This way, they made it easier for the customer to do a contactless pickup, which is great. They can order online or by the phone. They're trying to implement cash paying options for us, because that's our only option right now, is to pay
Right.
government municipalities like the Oregon State in cash.
Right.
So those are still being worked on. I mean, that's a federal issue more so than the state, but that's one issue, hopefully, that I think the pandemic will also help modify for the better in change. I definitely see cannabis use as a whole going up. The amount of edibles being consumed, CBD in the non-medical and recreational states has definitely increased. The questions and people asking information about CBD is definitely increasing. And also, I've noticed in my retail sector, the edibles and the consumables have increased more so than the flower, which is also tailed off a little with the vaping since the big the big scare with the whole vaping industry, but that was more so on the untested products, which if you're getting it from a medical dispensary or a recreational dispensary, they have to be tested. If they aren't, then the dispensary should be, you should notify the local authorities about that. But the vaping is definitely, I also noticed is on the cartridge wise, and the concentrates has increased because people were consuming so much flower at home all the time does put a stress in your lungs. So I noticed that also has increased.
Okay.
And Monica, circling back to what you said, if like something that Dr. Craig said and Chef Michelle said, people are experimenting now. And something that the pandemic has done of people being forced to stay home, they're doing a lot more research.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's looking to invest in a cannabis or CBD company, whether it's looking to sit here and to use CBD for a medical condition, or if you're a cook or a chef, you want to experiment, people are having the time to actually sit down, read articles, actually do some recon work, and literally experiment. And that's something that we're hearing a lot more on every aspect in this sector, that people have the time to actually do the recon work now.
Absolutely. And I know I'm guilty of watching a lot of documentaries about different things that maybe I didn't have the time for before. And understanding the industry, Dr. Craig, I think you were saying from seed to sale, understanding what that process looks like and really how hard it is for the regulation for the industry to kind of survive and thrive. So it's all very interesting on a research aspect for sure. So great point, Dr. David. Thank you.
As Dr. David was mentioning, also with that extra time at home, people aren't out and doing their everyday usual activities. So when they are taking these products, they're actually able to take a step back and see if they're actually working on them, and notice the little nuances that might just occur slowly over time, compared to doing your everyday hustle and bustle, getting to work, getting the kids to school, going shopping, always being out, and not realizing the little increments that they actually help on. Because most of the time it's not an overnight thing. It takes a few weeks to a month, but slowly, it's a slow progression. So people are now able to digest what's going on with their own body, and take a look and see how it is really affecting them.
Yeah, you get to know yourself inside and out. Whether you like it or not is a different thing, but you get to know yourself a little better. Great.
Very good point.
So, Dr. David and Dr. Craig, you alluded to regulations and how the industry is going and all the research that we can do. So I know this is a super hot topic. How important are the upcoming elections on both a local and federal level for investments, for food, for instance, edibles, and just overall medicinal purposes?
Dr. Craig, you want to go first on this one? Because I know you and I have two different probably opinions on this.
Yeah. When you look at the big picture, both of the main candidates, not taking either side, really aren't for cannabis legalization. They have seen the benefits of it, but I think it's really to get in your local level voting is going to be the best option for people. Get out and vote, no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, a neutral party. Get out and vote. Get your opinion out there. If it not only just to let everyone else see what the vibe is through the country. Because it is very important. We're at a point now where people are so far apart on so many things we think of, but we're really not. We're really still going through everything. We're all here together. So getting that done together is the most important thing. At first I thought Joe Biden might have been the better candidate for the cannabis sector until he had Kamala Harris, who was completely against it. So I'm not quite sure where that will go in the future. I know that President Trump has some people telling him that it is a good thing, but he's still steadfast of wanting this at a state level, which is definitely hampering all of the industry itself, especially with 280E and with the tax dollars being given to the government that should be able to be written off like the normal business, especially since we are, as we stated earlier, an essential business. If we're an essential business, those employees are essential. So the lighting is essential, the electric is essential, my water, my sanitation, which none can be written off like a normal business. So those should all be considered essential, and I should have some types of tax write-off to offset that, but there still aren't. And I think that's the biggest thing. And
well, also banking too. I mean, banking is a big part of that too. And also, like, it really goes down to when it comes to the upcoming election, like I first and foremost, I'm a medical professional. Just plain simple. In the ideal world, I'd rather have all 50 states have medical cannabis than legalization. Like, if you're going to use it as medicine, treat it as medicine, and let's get access to all 50 states for medicine. But we don't live in that real world. Also, too, there's a lot of racism. There's a lot of in cannabis. You have a lot of people who have previous charges, which has affected them dramatically. So there's very much a political side, an incarceration side of things. But if we look back at 2016, a lot of us in the cannabis sector, even when Trump was elected and with Jeff Sessions, a lot of us kind of joked around because we knew it was still here to stay. It wasn't going away. Right. So you saw a lot of stocks crash, and that was a great time to buy because it's going to go right back up. Right. So like for this election, it's a little more like, hey, cannabis is not going away. It's in over 33 states. It's at the end of the day. Also, too, the one thing, whether you're for or against our current president, he's always said, let the states handle the states. He's all about the state economy. And, during this pandemic, he has quoted numerous times saying, well, if the states had their budgets in order, we would have been a little bit better off financially. So now you're looking at the tax revenue. If we use the state of New Jersey, Governor Murphy's using literally the pandemic big time to talk about, hey, if we legalize cannabis, that's really going to help our tax revenue dramatically. Right. So this upcoming election, yes, it's important. Yes, you have some very key states where if they were to pass legalization or even pass more medical uses, it's going to help open up because you still have like the Bible Beltway, which is very anti. But as we tell our investors, it's not going anywhere. Yeah. It's still here to stay. You're not going to see this huge retraction. As we also tell people too, this is a great time to start loading up on cash if you want to invest in the stock market or if you want to invest in private deals, because there's going to be a lot of great deals come the fourth quarter after this election.
Yeah. When the dust settles a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. Well, for me, I think legalization, even if it's just medical, personally, my industry, my sector has seen, I believe the numbers are between 30 and 40% increase in overdoses and suicides. The hospitality industry is kind of a noted area for people with substance abuse. It's readily available. The alcohol is readily available. But when the cannabis is not readily available, they're going to turn to something to get through the stress of this pandemic. I mean, how many restaurants were decimated and unemployed? Mm-hmm. And I mean, shut down permanently. So I think that's a sector that we definitely need to gear some, we need to listen, because that's a pretty significant part of the voting population works in an industry that's almost non-existent anymore.
Right.
And like I said, I've seen so many people, suicide, overdose, alcoholism. It's definitely needed and something I hope that they get out and they speak their piece on and they recognize.
Something that Chef Michelle brings up too, if we want to take it to the next level, is that when people say, cannabis is a gateway drug, okay, technically alcohol is a drug. Did you give your kid a first sip of beer or his first joint? You gave the kid a sip of alcohol first, all right? And if you look at the increase on who's using it more, it's actually the baby boomers. And you're seeing more and more baby boomers saying, I don't want to take these 5 or 6 different medications. And I'm sure Dr. Craig can talk more about this part. They're saying, hey, I'm looking for something else. I'm looking for an alternative. So we really see who's also using that product. And then you take it to the next level. And if you view cannabis kind of like penicillin, back in 2015, 16, I was quoted in USA Today saying how cannabis is modern day penicillin. Well, penicillin's everywhere and we can use it everywhere.
Right.
But for those people that are using cannabis or alternate form, they don't have that access.
Right.
Then what are they turning to? They're turning to other stuff. And that goes back to what Chef Michelle was saying, her point as well, too.
It's readily available. I mean, tobacco, alcohol, all of that you can buy anywhere. You're actually encouraged. If I just watched how, drinking Zoom parties and, hey, how are you getting through this pandemic? And it's wine o'clock. And I don't think that's very healthy at all. And there's definitely that huge stigma, prohibition, and Big Pharma did a really good job of demonizing cannabis use. And it's still, we have a responsibility as medical professionals and food professionals to set a standard that we're not a bunch of Shaggy and Scoobies sitting around getting high all the time. But I think that responsible dosing and responsible education and making it accessible, but again, responsibly.
Right.
I think that's all stuff that needs to be put on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at numbers, just basic pure numbers, and you look at the states that have opioid problems compared to states that actually have them medically or recreationally, and you look at the time that they were put medical or recreational, the amount of opioid deaths per year, there's only been a decrease. If you just look at numbers, which is just numbers, not asking anything, the numbers aren't lying. Opioid use has been increasing. So if those states have been decreasing in deaths, there has to be some correlation. Because around the country, especially this time, there has been an increase in opioid usage, and no one's really talking about it. It's been a silent killer throughout COVID, especially with COVID symptoms and the respiratory depression that opiates cause. It's not a great combination at all. So
at all.
If I could just chime in on that, I feel like I've seen so many documentaries and news stories, articles about the opioid epidemic, and everybody knows how big of a deal it is. There are towns in the country where it's 300 pills per person per day, like the equivalent of that being prescribed, which is ridiculous. But nothing seems to be done about that. And all the attention seems to be on this industry for CBD, hemp, all of that. And it just doesn't make sense to me because one seems to be naturally grown, the other is heavily lobbied, and it's just understanding, where the money goes.
You answered your own question.
Yeah, I just got an email that IV OxyContin was just approved by the FDA yesterday. I was like, oh, great. So I mean, the only thing I could have said to that was great. I mean, it's basically purified heroin, I'm guessing. That's what it's a little upsetting. I mean, we can go other ways. The government tried to do things back in March of 14, where they made Schedule 3 opiates non-refillable, which they thought was going to be a good thing. So you had someone who had a Tylenol 3, let's say, or a hydrocodone, and they got one script and they got 5 refills. So they were okay for 6 months. They didn't have to go back to the doctor. So once they changed that, which they thought was for the better, they had got one script and they had to go back to the doctor in a month. The only thing that did was make the patient ask for a stronger medication, so they technically would think it would last longer. And we know that doesn't happen. They just started using more and more medicine and became stronger and stronger, and got into a vicious cycle of going to the doctor and going to the pharmacy. And then when they couldn't see the doctor, they're using too many pills, they go to street drugs. And that's another big issue. And we've seen the rise in hepatitis and HIV also happen because of that. If you look at the clusters from 2014 to now, you'll see that, especially in those towns that were decimated with the opioid industry, that had people completely addicted, even more so went to the harder medicines. So those are also numbers that can't be denied. But we can't put stuff in front of him. We can only do what we do. So.
Right.
Well, and I think a big part of that, sorry about that. I think a big part of that also is they're regulating the cannabis industry so heavily where it's legal, and they're taxing it so much that sometimes in states where it is legal, it's financially out of reach of the people that really need to have it, especially when they're unemployed. And so alcohol's cheap. Street drugs are actually not as expensive as dispensary cannabis can be in some places. And
Yeah, over $500 of taxes for an ounce.
Yes, I work in
yes.
a dispensary in New York, and it's for their high quality cannabis, it's about $70 an eighth.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's tested, it is pretty,
right.
but
For
it's still too
listeners
expensive.
that don't know what that looks like, what is the street value if it's illegal?
That's
Right?
$560, what Craig is saying in New York with
Yeah.
taxes. And you could probably, depending where you're at, get it for about $200 an ounce.
Yeah,
Okay.
200
So
to
literally,
400
you're
depending on
literally getting it for
quality.
60% cheaper. And then here comes the other thing is too, and I'm happy Dr. Craig brought this up, and this goes back to what like Chef Michelle and cooking with CBD and cannabis is you need to know what you're putting in your body.
Right.
Okay. And we talk about these high school parties that do the pill party, like, hey, take a bunch of pills, pop them in a jar and take what you want. Like one thing with like, especially like as a physical therapist teaching patients how to use cannabis properly, like, oh, well, I get something off the street and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I go, no shit, because you don't know what you're putting in your body.
Right.
Like that's like me saying, hey, I need an anti-inflammatory. Okay, I'm just gonna take a random pill from like the medicine cabinet. No, you need to know what you're putting in your body. Like if we look at the country of Israel, Israel has been studying the cannabis plant for a very long time. And their research really shows like what strains and the proper CBD and THC ratios, what really works best for different medical conditions. And that also goes back to like, if Chef Michelle's cooking with it, like great. What kind of infusion technique are you going to do? You know, if you're using something that's tainted, that's like her taking a tomato. And I used to be in the testing lab sector. I used to own several testing labs in cannabis. And one of my favorite stories ever was we found mold on cannabis on a flower. We failed. We failed the grower, and the grower was like, "Why? It's not that bad." And the head scientist literally said this, and to this day it sticks with me. He goes, it's like taking an orange from a restaurant, or a bag of oranges, throwing it in the dumpster for 2 weeks, coming back 2 weeks later and using that same orange to cook with it full of mold and crap and everything. That's what you're putting in your body. So you're doing more harm than good.
On that note, also, I mean, while experimenting at home and, you know, there's, you know, people are growing and getting trim and hitting up their local guy and they're extracting it with different techniques, you know, you have no idea what the strength of it is. None.
Well, not even more so than the strength. If you want to look past that, if you're going from your local grower or a friend, you're just getting leaves, you don't know the chemicals they use to grow it. They could be using heavy metals. You know, the chemicals that were in the soil, besides even whatever they utilized, that soil could have been poisonous to you. So, I mean, especially with cannabis being it's a soil remediator. It actually, it nourishes, it takes out the bad stuff from the soil, and the good stuff's allowed to be there. So it's actually a great crop to work on the soil, to actually get nutrients back into that soil, get all those heavy metals and pollutants out of the soil. They're using it in Chernobyl right now. They're using vast amounts of hemp to bring back that soil that they can use it instead of 200 centuries, maybe sometime next century. So it's you know, it's being utilized. So that also needs to be known that the cannabis that you're getting or the product you're getting really should be tested, just because you don't know what's in it. You don't know about the heavy metals, the pesticides, besides what can grow on it or grow in it.
Crops, right? Even
yes,
in
100%.
California,
Yes.
There's a lot of arsenic in the ground, and if you drink
too much, E. coli we hear of all the time. I mean,
absolutely.
And for me, I won't infuse with raw flower. I won't do it anymore. I'll use distillate, I'll use terpenes, but I will not, just so that I can control the dosage and be responsible.
What is a distillate for those that
don't?
Oh, it's the complete extraction of the THC out of the plant. So they take the plant, they freeze dry it, and then they under high pressure and depending on what type of fluid they're using, ethanol, butane, CO2, they extract out just a particular cannabis, or the cannabinoids that they want, and that's called a distillate. So it's just pure THC, so you can get an actual milligram dosing. It's more of an intense high usually out of a distillate because it's one chemical. So you're going to get an intense, short acting. That maybe not be 2 to 4 hours. It might be 1 to 2 hours of a high, depending on your tolerance.
For purposes.
Exactly.
It's precise.
Precise.
And again, and
especially when multiple dishes are being utilized.
That's exactly it. Because you don't, I mean, if you're stretching out a dinner over the course of 2 hours, 2.5 hours, you don't, I mean, that's going to stretch your high out. And also, you know, there's the balance of not too much sugar. And if you use salt and fat, you'll extend your high, and you can boost your uptake using certain terpenes and certain spices, actually. So, I mean, there's a science to it, a little bit of chemistry that's like the fun edible kind, but responsible. So it's all about what you start with.
Absolutely. But
right.
Yes, my next question is, Dr. David and Dr. Craig, have you ever had a cannabis-infused meal? What was the experience like?
I actually had a CBD-infused meal out in New Jersey with Chef Michelle. She prepared. It was very nice. We had a group of, we had council members there. We had state representatives. We had people, heads of industry, former NFL football players and their wives, who was a lawyer, was there. So we had a very diverse group of people. And you noticed towards the middle of dinner, everyone was conversating. The mood, they were all relaxed, and you just I took a step back and listened, because I noticed it and I was feeling it, that you felt the relaxation and the camaraderie in the room from the meal, because it wasn't there before they started eating, and people were put at different tables and they didn't know each other, and it was really nice. I had a very pleasant experience, and that was just CBD, so
right.
It was very, very interesting.
Okay.
I've done CBD and THC, and I think Chef Michelle hit the nail on the head. It's about knowing what you're doing and being able to dose properly. I remember I've been in the cannabis sector since 2009. I remember going to an event back in like 2012, 2013, and the person wasn't a professional chef. It was kind of doing it like not really the proper way, and some people were just, for lack of a better term, too high, kind of just they didn't know their own tolerance.
Yeah.
The cook / chef didn't know how much they were infusing in the product as well too, and doing it evenly. In terms of CBD dinners and events, I've done numerous, and they're absolutely great. Dr. Craig puts it best. It's kind of nice to take a step back and sit here and to see how people are reacting. And
right.
What's really cool is I've actually been to a couple CBD dinners where no alcohol served at all. It's really interesting. And when you go to a cannabis event, how little alcohol is served.
Okay.
And the one thing, and this is a true story with Dr. Craig, we went out to a dinner with a mutual colleague of ours, and I'm 6'3", 250. I can handle a couple drinks. And I had my third beer, and the person I was with was like, "Man, I'm on my second beer. I can't keep up with you. Like, are you okay? Like, you're drinking a lot." I'm like, "What? It's 3 beers in 2 hours. It's not that big of a deal." But when you go to a lot of cannabis events, alcohol is not served at all. It's all cranberry juice, orange juice, water,
natural beverages.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the cannabis sector, like you were stating earlier, like to know what they're putting in their body.
Yep.
And a lot of people are offset with the alcohol. They don't like the hangover effect. They don't like the headache. So that's why cannabis is a great option. Also with even caffeine. I have a CBD infused coffee company, and we've noticed a lot of people like the decaf because they don't like the caffeine associated with the caffeine feeling, even though there's a great symbiotic relationship between the CBD and the caffeine. It takes off the jitters, it increases your focus. It's a really nice combination.
It is.
Plus,
I've also
THC
noticed
dehydrates you also, which a lot of people forget.
Right.
Well, and my thing is that, so many people use CBD and cannabis to stay sober from alcohol because, again, it's such a prevalent and an almost an encouraged thing. And so I know a lot of people, they're like, yeah, I'm in sobriety and I owe it all to cannabis.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
that's a great thing to hear.
Chef Michelle, being that dosing is so important in infused meals, how did you get it right?
I have really good friends. He's sitting down at the end of this panel. My scientist friends help me a lot. I'll be like, "Yo, doc, I need some help." But it's also a simple matter of math and understanding, culinary math. I'm by far and away no algebraic genius or geometry, but I can do the heck out of some culinary math. And you just have to treat it like you would any other ingredient.
Right.
You know, I currently work in the healthcare sector where nutritionals and dosing things even so much as salt and fat and sugar are critical. So I just treat it like it's another critical ingredient.
Okay.
And, you know, but when I want to know about strains, when I want to produce a certain effect, I call the good doctor down there, either of them. And I have some great friends.
Okay.
I'm very blessed.
Always good to have great friends.
It is.
Awesome. So switching the theme a little bit, I guess this question is great for Dr. David. How has climate change affected your industry, growth cycles, medicinal properties, and varieties?
Wow, that's a very loaded question.
In 10 words or less.
So in my opinion, climate change is real. I'll just say that right off the bat.
Numbers.
But I will say this is that one is you have a big difference between indoor growing and outdoor growing. And that's just in general when it comes to cannabis. When it comes to hemp, though, I think it's going to be really interesting when industrial hemp hits the United States really hard. And we're going to have these 200,000 square foot warehouses doing indoor hemp grows. Okay. And doing indoor industrial hemp, which is going to be used for rope, clothes, pellets. It's actually used for energy and to fuel.
Plastics.
Yeah, plastics, exactly. I mean, you're seeing houses in down south being made out of hemp bricks.
Yeah, hempcrete.
But I will say is when it comes to outdoor growing in general, for investors, they want to see companies that have locations in multiple states. Mm-hmm. A great example is we saw a lot of hemp farmers down in Kentucky lose their entire farm due to the tornadoes. Oh. We saw other hemp farmers lose their land due to some hurricanes. And that's something where we have to tell people, if you want to diversify and have peace of mind and decrease your level of risk, you want to invest in companies that have diversity, have multiple locations, right. You know, or that have that backup. And the one thing is, what is nice is you do have insurance companies that are now starting to actually insure the crops. Mm-hmm. And also for CBD, they actually offer now what's called business interruption insurance. And business interruption insurance was actually very key in the beginning of the pandemic. Luckily, about 20% of our CBD clients already had that and paid for that. They joked around with us saying, why would we need this at all? And we kind of said, look what's going on over in China right now. Why don't you get it now, pay the money, because heaven forbid something happens. And so that's kind of what we're really seeing right now. And I think Chef Michelle can talk more about the what's going on with the produce. Because what's really interesting is talking to some of our clients that are doing meal preps, including CBD, they're seeing issues right now in meat, corn, potatoes.
Right. Your supply chain is not okay. I'm telling you that right now. Supply chain is not okay.
And now what's going on with California and Oregon, also with the wildfires, it's also decimated a lot of these farms. Yes. So the interruption insurance is a great thing if they've done it. Also with climate change, we've seen the plants themselves. I mean, cannabis itself is a great adjuster. It's a great adapter. It's adapted over millions of years. Right. So it'll adapt to whatever's going on in its own environment. You're going to see, percentages go down. You might see plumes more in the cannabis that's out there now and being grown just from all the pollutants that are in the air. But with some states that you want to look at with climate change in general, like California into Oregon. So you have the green triangle, they call it in California. And with climate change, that's just moving up to Southern Oregon. So you're having all these other places now in Oregon that are becoming more ideal for the cannabis sector, even though Southern Oregon has some of the best cannabis in the world. But now these couple of degrees in change in temperature and change in moisture levels have really, have increased the amount of product they're able actually to produce. So, you take the good and you take the bad. So if some places are increasing because it is getting those couple of degrees warmer that are just needed for this plant. So there's always a lot of bad, but there can be a little good.
Right.
I would like to also say, I mean, Craig, are you going to see, do you think, sorry about this, guys. Are you going to see cannabis itself like developing and adapting to change since it's such an adaptable plant? Are we going to see more varieties that are growing in a hotter, warmer climate?
I mean, I believe we already are, because people are
Okay.
growing them in every climate all over
Okay.
the world. So wherever they're growing it, even if it's the same strain you're growing, let's say in Florida, or let's say in Kentucky, and you're in Puerto Rico now, that climate is completely different. So that
Right.
plant's going to evolve differently,
Right.
you know, and just it's going to just grow differently, you know, compared to all its nutrients and sun and moisture and pollutants. And so even though it might be the same strain, it's going to grow differently and adapt to its own climate.
Right. Just
I
like
think
wine.
it's going to be interesting to see, like, you know, what the different strains produce. Like, if it changes the CBD, if it changes the CBM, if it changes, you know, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that. As a botanist, that's got to be kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, and all this just different growth and the complete hybridization of this plant, basically, and the cross pollinating, and we have all these different strains. I mean, we've lost maybe some of those main strains, but we've gained so many others. And
Well, the species that survives is the one that's most adaptable to change.
well,
So
we're able to manipulate it. So I mean, we
that
can
too.
really do a lot with this plant.
Awesome. So I guess this question is for you, Dr. Craig. From a scientific standpoint, what makes cannabis different than a pharmaceutical or over-the-counter remedy? And I know we kind of talked about opioids and alcoholism with Chef Michelle, and you know, different kinds of ways to self-medicate and then properly medicate with a doctor kind of looking over it. So what is the difference?
Well, I mean, well, if you look at the basic, so you have the plant cannabis, which really has very, very few side effects. It's a whole plant. You can extract out of it to get your particular THC and CBD levels, which is really done in the medical state, like in New York. We have a 20-to-1 ratio, a 1-to-1 ratio, and a 1-to-20 ratio. What those are is a 20-to-1. So there's 20 parts of THC for every 1 part of CBD. Then you have 1 part of THC for every 1 part of CBD. Then you have 1 part of THC for every 20 parts of THC.
Okay.
For CBD. So you can find your range, and then you can go up with those. So pharmaceuticals in general are basically poison. You know, you're giving stuff out in micrograms a lot of times. And if I gave it to you in a milligram as another dose of another medicine, you could die. So it's the side effects from pharmaceuticals it's very finite. Where we're working within a range, and anything above that range can really, really be detrimental to your health. Whereas cannabis, anything really outside your range might make you kind of a little neurotic at first, and then really just go to sleep. So the side effects from it are very minimal compared to pharmaceuticals. You can extract, like we talked before, like the distillate. You can get your pure THC, and you can then add your CBD to it, and you can have a precise dose. Or you can do the whole plant extraction, where you would actually have to get a lab report to see exactly what's in that plant. And that can vary from crop to crop and even plant to plant, depending on the time of year, if fires happen, let's say in Oregon or California, the temperature during that time period. So even the same crop for that same year can vary from year to year. So whole plant extraction is a little less precise than the complete distillation of particular cannabinoids. But even if you're extracting the whole plant, you can get a lab report. You can see what you're putting into your body. You would know what's really working for you, and you can dose from there.
Right.
So you know, it's really the side effect profile and just the amount of you know, problems that can arise with the pharmaceutical compared to a cannabis. You know, you can have liver failure, kidney failure, you can have stomach blockage, you can have a heart attack, you can have a stroke. Whereas with cannabis, it's, you know, the only way it might kill you is someone drops 2,000 pounds from the roof on your
Dr.
head.
Craig, also, isn't it
Yes.
true that some strains of cannabis actually help decrease your appetite?
Yes, there is, you know, THCV right now is being widely studied, especially with the diabetics, to help them regulate their sugar levels. So it's still not a complete science. Yes, we're still doing a lot of research, but there are some particular cannabinoids that have shown to decrease appetite. There was one on the market back in 2012 that was actually taken off. It was on in Europe for appetite suppression, but it was a cannabinoid blocker. So it actually blocked the cannabinoid receptor. And what that did is they made people psychotic and suicide tendencies. So they actually had to pull it off the market because we realized that blocking a cannabinoid receptor is not good because we actually have these throughout our body where we evolved with cannabinoid receptors. And so to block those would be like blocking your serotonin or your dopamine receptors or something else that your body really needs.
Right.
Well, and I mean, when Prohibition came, and I highly recommend anybody that's interested, read the book Smoke Signals. When Prohibition came, you know, they stopped growing industrial hemp here, and we stopped feeding the byproduct to our pigs and our chickens, and we stopped getting those cannabinoids in our milk, and we stopped getting it in our eggs and our dairy. And I think that's when we've seen an increase in disease here in our country.
Yeah, there's a whole study about endocannabinoid deficiency because of that, because of our wild stock. Because we weren't getting a large amount, but we were getting microdoses of cannabinoids, just enough to offset our body. That's all we really needed, and it was actually leveling us up. And there are studies with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, a lot of these musculoskeletal diseases. They're trying to find some correlation between the decrease in our wild stock and actually in our food products. So.
Right.
So interesting. I never thought of it.
And I think that's why people, when they have CBD for the first time, they react to it the way they do. Like when Dr. Craig says they sit in the room and all of a sudden it's this relaxing, you know, camaraderie. And I think it's because, you know, their system is finally getting something that it needs that it doesn't have.
That's amazing. I mean, what I've taken is magnesium powder because I know we're all magnesium deficient and it helps calm me down when I'm feeling anxious. The first time I took it, it knocked me out for 9 hours, and I think I took a little too much. But it's true, we're deficient in a lot of different minerals and vitamins, and it's not foods that we eat in one way or another. And they can be bad things, right? Like there can be too much arsenic in the red wine that you're drinking. Right. So there's a balance in everything. So thank you for explaining that, Dr. Craig. Super helpful.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
So I'm going to jump into the closing segment. I hope you all prepared for this question, prepared your answer for this question. I ask everybody in a minute or less, if you can just tell me what your mission is. So Chef Michelle, what's your mission?
I want to see people be able to be 51 years old like me and say that I don't take any prescriptions every day. I want to see my friends stop dying, and I want to see people be able to control what they put in their bodies and have a choice and a say that's not paid for and lobbied by an industry. I'm a born free American woman, and I want to do what's best for me because I think they underestimate our intelligence. And your consumer is more educated than we've ever been before because the information is out there. Right. It's not hush hush. You're not like sitting in your mom's basement talking about weed. You know, like it's out there for us and we can be educated, but I think that we should be able to make that choice. I mean, I agree that there should be regulations in place for testing and safety, but legality, I think that's up to us. And that's my mission. I want to see people be able to heal themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Dr. David, what's your mission?
It's kind of an offshoot for my company. It's what the motto is, we help your company achieve greatness. But my personal motto is, you know, are you willing to achieve greatness? As a serial entrepreneur, and I've been very blessed to do work in over 30 different states in 7 different countries. And here in the US, and depending where you are, we live in a very negative society where people are always beating you down. You know, the glass is always half empty, never half full. And in general, we all have greatness within us. It's just, are you willing to achieve it? And everyone has their own level of greatness they want to achieve. Just, you have to really stop, take a step back and say, are you willing to achieve it? And after a lot of very interesting, I'll leave it that way, business and personal experiences, that motto really kind of came to full fruition a couple of years ago. Are you willing to achieve your greatness? Because at the end of the day, you're your own boss. You make the final decisions on everything. Just, are you willing to achieve it? Because we all have it within ourselves.
Right.
Just, are you willing to do it? And that's pretty much the biggest thing, is if we can just make one positive, I can make one positive statement where, you know, you feel that, hey, you know, I can achieve my greatness, I'm willing to do it, then the mission's accomplished.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. David. So Dr. Craig, best for last.
All right. It kind of goes with what Dr. David was saying. It's basically to get everyone to at least try cannabinoids. That's why I started Flowerpower.coffee company. I mean, most 80% of the population drinks coffee. They figured that was the easiest medium to get CBD into someone. So if that would be their stepping stone to see there are other possibilities out there. There are other things that can be in their vitamin cabinet, their tool chest to use to help get them through every day and help them deal with life's, you know, everyday trials and tribulations. Life's not easy. You know, even that person you look down the street has that beautiful car, the beautiful house, and that you think the beautiful wife and kids. Everyone has problems, and to give them something that they can utilize instead of a pharmaceutical, or even if it is considered a pharmaceutical, if it is cannabinoid, to have them use it is basically my mission. To get everyone to at least try and to realize there are alternates for everyone, and you don't need to be looked at or belittled for trying to use a cannabinoid, especially if it's going to help you. So that's really it. It's just, you know, getting everyone out there. Even if it's you know, just the small amount of CBD, and even if you are reluctant to try it first, I really think that people should try it, just because I see on a day in and day out basis with my patients, you know, a lot of people can use, you know, some cannabis compared to some of the other medicines they're on. And when I saw that about 10 years ago, it's when I got into the cannabis sector, you know, pharmaceutically. That's what was one of the main reasons why, is to see them offset a lot of these pharmaceuticals with a cannabinoid. So that's really, you know, that's my mission, to have everyone at least try cannabinoids for some of their problems.
That's great. All of your missions sound wonderful. And I thank you all for your time today, sharing all the answers to all the questions that I had, and kind of a bit of your industry experience and over the past few decades. So thank you all.
And Maka, real quick, what's your mission?
Yeah.
My mission is to have really interesting conversations with as many people as I can talk to about things that interest me. So it can be CBD related, it can be makeup related, it can be other health and wellness and self-care related. I don't really care. As long as people have a passion and they want to talk to me, that's my mission, to talk to them.
Great.
Awesome.
So thanks
Well
for
done.
helping me check my mission.
Excellent.
Today.
Thank you for having us.
Tomorrow is another day.
Yeah, tomorrow's
There
another.
you go.
Just a reminder that all the thoughts, opinions, and expressions are exclusive to the person and not representative of any company, brand, or organization.